Hi, everyone. I'm Caroline Zakari, and I work in the Office of Civics and Community Services here at the Los Angeles Public Library. Welcome to Financial Literacy Month. Today's presentation is called Introduction to Financial Planning Basics and is part of a month of programs in support of financial literacy. This program is brought to you by the Financial Planning Association of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Public Library. Today, the FPA will provide Jamie Rugg from the FPA will provide an overview of the financial planning process and highlight steps from gathering information to implementation to monitoring. The audience will also learn about setting goals, budgeting, managing debt, saving, investing, and more. We'll have a brief Q&A after the presentation, so please send us your questions throughout the program. Thank you, and take it away, Jamie.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure we are all set with our screens here. And we are going to today talk about what it means to be, what we'll actually talk about is talking about introduction to financial planning. What we'll cover during our call today is what does the term financial planning really mean? Why is it important? We'll talk about the various components of a financial plan, introduce the steps to build a basic financial plan for you and your family, and discuss tools and ways to put these strategies into action. So to get us started, what is financial planning? I think we forget sometimes in the industry. I am a certified financial planner. A lot of us are in this space, but what does that really mean? And what we want to take a look at is what this term means. It's not just investments. It's not just, are you going to be able to retire? We want to look at every different component that comprises your financial life and make sure those pieces are working together cohesively. So as an individual, when you're thinking about what does this mean for me and my family in my lifetime, what it really is focused on is how do you get the life you want? As we say, money is not the journey, it's the fuel. It's the way to get you to where you want to go. What really are your life goals? What matters to you? What's most important to you? What financial steps do you need to take to reach those goals? So we want to think about what's important, what do I have, what do I need, and how do I build a plan to get me to that next phase? Make a plan and then implement it. That's one key thing we'll talk about towards the end is implementing a plan. If it's just a plan on paper, it doesn't help you too much. But once you're able to implement it, that's how you actually make those steps to get you to the next phase. And financial planning is an actual lifelong process. It's not something that we pick up once and we're done. It is something we come back to, adjust, monitor over time to get us to where we want to go. So thank you so much for joining us today, and let's kick it off. So ultimately, when we talk about the term financial planning, what that really means is it kind of encompasses these kind of major areas in the financial realm. It's a comprehensive system and a systematic process for getting your financial house in order and helping you to meet those goals and achieve what matters most to you and to your family. So the main components that we talk about or cover as a financial planner, we look at risk management. So insurance, whether that's health insurance, auto policies, life insurance, all those different components that help protect you from risks. That's the insurance component. We employee benefits and retirement planning. We look at that certainly for households, 401k plans, things like that. Investments, and that's certainly a large component. Investing for the long term, making sure we have the individual in a proper investment allocation for your risk tolerance and your capacity to take on risk. Tax planning, certainly taxes can come into play in making sure that all the various assets and investments are we're planning for taxes for the future. Certainly in retirement, that comes into play as well. And a key one for a lot of us here is retirement. What does that look like? Will I have enough? When will I be able to retire? Will I be able to retire early? And one very large and important component that we've talked about in other sessions with LA Public Library is talking about estate planning, looking at what does that look like? What do I want the end of life to look like? And who do I want to actually receive and receive my assets at the end of my life? And how do I make sure I'm protecting my family? So each one of these pieces comprises what we call financial planning. And we are going to go through a number of these today to talk about and offer some tools to help you think through and start to build one for yourself. So first and foremost, as we kick off here, I want you to take a moment and ask yourself these questions. How much do you spend every month? And is your income enough to cover it all? So think about that. When you receive your paychecks on a monthly basis, do you have enough to cover what you need? Or is there still a bit more that you have left over, or are you barely making ends meet? So that kind of goes towards the spending plan we'll talk about first. Also, what must you set aside to buy a house, to pay for college, or to be able to retire comfortably? That goes to the savings and investment portion of financial planning. What happens if you become sick, if you have a car accident, or someone were to pass away? That's where we talk about that risk management part. That's where insurance comes into play and making sure you and your family are protected. And then, do you have enough money for a medical emergency? Or if something happens, if you were to lose your job tomorrow, do you have enough income to support your lifestyle for a few months and make sure you get to a good place? And that's where we talk about emergency funds. So those are the key things we want to think about. So I'll give everyone just a couple more seconds to think these questions through before we move on to the next slide. All right, so for the financial planning process, when we talk about this systematic process to help you reach your goals, it sounds great, but what does that actually mean? How do we go about doing this? So the key steps to create a financial plan and to produce this for yourself are the following 6 steps. So first and foremost, we want to gather the information. What do I have? What do I need? What do I spend? We really want to think about goals. What are my personal goals? What are my goals for my family? What do I want life to look like in 5, 10, 30 plus years? And that is completely subjective and up to you of what matters most to you. But we want to design this around what matters and what is important to you and your family. The third step is we want to assess the current situation, take a look at, how is my spending versus my savings? How is my monthly cash flow? How am I doing in terms of getting ready for retirement? And after we take a look at all those pieces, we want to actually start to devise an action plan. And that can be as simple as writing it down on a little piece of paper. These are my next steps to take to get me moving towards the end goal of what I really like. Number 5, execute the plan. Plan is only a piece of paper unless it's actually implemented. And then 6, as life changes, as our priorities change, income, expenses, all of those pieces, we want to be able to monitor and adjust the plan over time to make sure it is matching still what our goals are and it's still on track. So starting off with step number 1, gather information. So as you're watching this today, I want you to think about what financial resources do you have and what financial commitments do you also have? So think about, even if you have a piece of paper in front of you, even better. Start jotting down, what's your pay? How much pay do you, whether it's monthly, weekly, biweekly, annually, how much money are you getting on a consistent basis? And write down any other income sources as well that you're receiving. Then also make a separate section. What are those expenses? How much are you paying for rent, car payments, insurance? Make a line item for each one of those as well. Also, don't forget about those debts, whether it's credit card payments, mortgages, student loans, car loans, all the rest of that. Jot those down too. And then how much do you have in your various bank accounts? What are the balances? What types of insurance policies do you have? List them out. Okay, I have a car policy. I have health insurance. I have a life insurance plan for a just in case emergency. So take all those down, gather this information or those documents together so you can review this all at once. And then think too about what are those values, whether it's cultural, what are your beliefs, what are your feelings about saving and spending? It can certainly be different for different people and different groups. And think about, what does that mean to you? What are those values, those beliefs? How is it dynamic with the family? Do you talk about finances? What does that look like? Could you rely on each other and have an open conversation? We want to think all of these different pieces of information through before we move on to the next step. So moving on to number 2, we do want to determine those goals. And this can be, certainly with some of my clients, it can be challenging at times. What does that look like? Thinking about what I want in the long term over my life is kind of a lot. It's a big question, but you don't have to start with, this is exactly what I want it to be. Start with what comes up to you. What do you want to have? What do you want to do? Or what do you want to be? Start thinking kind of high level, some of those, what does that feel like to you? What would make you happy? And that answer is going to be different for every single one of us here today. So please think about that and start jotting down, what would you like life to look like in the future? And what are those answers? And what values are most important to you? That can really help determine where you want to focus some of your financial plan as well. Nothing should be done in a vacuum. It should always kind of be combined and work together towards the end goal. So in conjunction with determining goals, that short term, where do you want your life to go in the short term? Is the most important thing to you right now making sure you have, some extra cash in your checking or savings account just in case unexpected expenses come up? Maybe it's you've accumulated a little bit of debt, whether on credit cards or other things, and you want to be able to get that under control and get rid of it. Do you have a upcoming goal of buying a house or buying a car in the next couple of years? Jot down each one of these various goals too, because each and the time frame. When do you plan to accomplish this, or when would you like to accomplish this goal? The time frame really does matter for how important it is to save and how urgent of a priority it is as well. And then longer term, where do you want your life to go? Do you see college education for yourself or your children? Is that something you want to pay for or accomplish? Do you want to provide additional risk protection for your family or yourself? Is the goal just retiring comfortably and just making sure you're able to stop working when you'd like to, not that you have to keep working until you're no longer able to because of your finances? What do you want that to look like? Maybe you wanted to travel a lot down the line. Any of those things that are priorities for you, take note of that because it's important and it does matter. But again, prioritize that list too. So as you're thinking about all these various goals, mark which ones are what we would call essential priorities, which ones are important, and which ones are kind of like the nice to haves. If in a perfect world, if everything works out great, I would love to be able to go on a trip, a 3-month trip in Europe or whatever it might be. Think about those aspirational goals, the important ones where I would like this to happen. I would like to be able to pay college education for my children. If it doesn't happen, I'm okay with that. And then, what's essential? I want to be sure I retire by a certain age, or I want to make sure I have this amount of money on a monthly basis. So think about those different pieces and prioritize them based on what matters most to you. So now we go into step 3, which is assessing your current situation. Does your income meet your current expenses? Are you dependent on high credit cards, high interest debt, or even your payday lenders to be able to get by on a monthly basis? How much are you saving? If you're able to save, how much are you saving? And is it enough to help you reach those goals? Have you taken a look at your credit report recently? And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but is your credit report correct? Do you have the right types of insurance or risk protection against the right types of risks? And one final question, of course, is, do you feel that your expectations are realistic? If we think, I want to retire in 5 years, if I were to think that myself, that would take quite a bit for me to be able to accumulate and save in the next couple of years. So that wouldn't be realistic for me, but think about which ones of these are realistic and make sure you're clear on where your current situation is and what kind of things are current calls on your money and time right now. So some tools along with this, your key tool when you're kind of assessing what's going on and starting to build your financial plan is actually looking at the spending plan. And this is one quick caveat from every single financial plan I've done for a client or done on a pro bono basis with LA Public Library. Almost every single financial plan is you make your break based on spending. Easier said than done. Expenses come up. Inflation is definitely taking a bite out of what we're able to afford in this day and age right now. But the make or break point for pretty much any financial plan doesn't matter how much or how little money or assets you have. It comes down to how much are you spending, and are you spending more than you have? And that's really honestly ends up being the key here. So in order to do that, and this is obviously not always the most fun exercise to go through, but please take out your checkbook, look at your ATM slips, look at those credit card statements, open up your banking app or log into your banking portal. Take a look and take a snapshot of 1 month or maybe 2 months if you have some expenses that don't hit every single month. Take an inventory of and actually write down, what are you spending? Where is it coming from? Where is it going each month? Figure out how much you're spending on each of the various categories and where is that money actually going. So jot lines down for rent, utilities, groceries, restaurant, shopping, insurance policies, cell phone bill, streaming services. A category I like to call unknown, because we all have a category of money we just don't quite know exactly where it goes, but it goes somewhere. So start keeping track of this and then total that based on your expenses based on how much income you have. So how much is left over at the end of the month between paying down any sort of monthly obligations, credit card minimums, credit card bills, student loans, all the rest. Naturally compare that to your income and take a look at what's realistically left at the end of the month for you. Writing this down will actually help you understand your current situation. And this is actually how we start. This is the first step, just how we start to plan for the future, take control of our expenses, and really understand how much we need to start setting aside in savings in order to reach those longer term goals. So please, whether it's in a Google sheet, a Google, Excel file, on a piece of paper, start keeping track of those monthly expenses. And it'll help you stay in line with where your money's going and where you want it to go in the future. It's not something you have to do every single month. Some people like to do that, but at least check in, if not annually, at least quarterly, and just kind of update your spending plan so you're seeing where the trends are and how it's going. So what does go into that spending plan? A little bit more detail here. We have fixed expenses and variable expenses, right? So fixed expenses, something that's not necessarily changing every month and something that we have to pay. Housing, rent, mortgages, those property taxes, insurance policy premiums, gas bill, electric, which have gone up quite a bit in the last few months, loan payments, things that we are required to spend or pay on a monthly basis. Those are our fixed expenses. We would also add savings should be one of those fixed expenses too. Easier said than done, but you really want to think about saving and set aside money for your future as a whole separate category. That's a fixed expense before other discretionary money gets spent. Make sure you're saving money for yourself for your future. And those variable expenses that can change or shift, that food certainly is a consistent expense, but it can, the amount each month can vary. Clothing, transportation, entertainment, gifts to family or friends, gifts to charity. That's on the fixed expenses side. And then income certainly is not just your paycheck pay. It can also be Social Security, pension money, disability, child supports, income from your investments, if you're receiving income from those investments as well. So keep track of both of those different columns for yourself when you're putting this together. And then one point we certainly want to emphasize, spending your money and your time as much as possible on the things that matter to you, the things that are important to you and your family. I try as much as possible to reduce the extraneous stuff that isn't as important. If it's not helping you feel good about who you are, helping your family move forward or yourself move forward, think about if it's something that if it's not essential, if you don't have to pay for it every month, should you be spending it, or can that go towards things that are going to matter for you and your family in the long run, things that are important to you in the long run. So we really want to align some of this with what is truly important to us as individuals. A couple tips related to spending. Yeah, get your family involved if you can, whether it's older parents, whether it's your children, your spouse, partner. Talk about this with the family. It's good to get everyone involved in the process and understanding how budgeting really works as a family. And it also can help the discussions where maybe I want to set aside a little bit of money for something fun. So what does that look like? How do we want to spend that as a family if we do have some left over? Again, choose where to spend and choose also where not to spend when you're taking an inventory of where your money is going. Oftentimes, I know for myself, I've certainly found things that I don't need and I should probably be cutting out. So take a look and make an active choice of where you're spending and where you're not spending. Don't spend more than you earn. Always easier said than done, but really important. That's the key component is please don't spend more than you earn as much as possible. And pay yourself first. Treat that savings, like you just mentioned on the prior slide, like a bill. Your future is more important, and setting yourself up for the future and for your future, what that looks like to you, is more important than a lot of these kind of those flex variable expenses each month. When you look at your budget and you look at your spending plan, start trying to set aside at a, if you're not saving anything yet, start small. Start at 3, 4, 5% and start to add a percent or two at least every year, if not more. Ideally, we would love everyone to get to the point where you can set aside 15 to 20% of your monthly income that's going to not just your retirement in a 401k or 403b plan, but also into actual savings or investments that will help you for the future. So pay yourself first. Your first dollar that you pay yourself first before you're paying everybody else. And then make adjustments as your income, as those expenses, as those goals change over time. Make adjustments. You will certainly, sometimes monthly income will be higher, sometimes it'll be lower. Be sure to make adjustments wherever you can, where you do have flexibility over time as those goals change as well. All right, step number 4 is to devise an action plan. Think about, we talked about the goals, we talked about taking an inventory, we talked about what that looks like, but determine what you need to reach those goals. And then see where you can change your spending habits or their saving habits to help you get on track. If you are going to be investing some of that money, choose appropriate savings and insurance products or investment products. We'll talk about that a little bit towards the end, but make sure you're using appropriate ones, meaning that are in line with what your goals are. Keep an eye on expenses and make sure that you're not in things that are illiquid or where you can't move your money around if you need it sooner. But the key thing is determine what you need to reach your goals. If the goal is to buy a new car in 3 years, for example, what do you think that is going to cost? Do you have anything set aside today? And break that up. How much of a down payment do you want, or do you plan to take out a car loan for part of it? And start thinking about how setting aside a little bit more each month or each week, or however you get paid, whatever works for you, how that's going to help you accomplish that goal and set yourself up to be in a good place when that does come down the line. And then also get control of your finances. So create that new spending plan, which includes the goals. So you have your current one, which is what reality is like, what life is like today, but create a new spending plan that includes your goals for the future. What does that look like in the future? And create that spending plan with those new categories for where you're trying to go. Do your best to pay off those debts, clean up your credit report, and make sure you have an emergency fund. One point about the emergency fund, if a client or a pro bono client comes to me and tells me, I have these goals, these are the things I want to do, I have this other debt, all these other great things that I'd like to accomplish, I don't really have, and I'll ask how much you have in savings or how much you have as a backup reserve just in case of emergency. If the answer is 0 or it's really small, that becomes the number one priority for us as financial planners for anybody that comes through our doors. It is so crucial to make sure we have a little bit of a cushion, and that serves a couple of purposes. It helps in case we have some event out of our control where we lose our job, we get, there's an injury, we have a health event, car pops a tire, need to buy new tires, anything like that, or you lose it, you are not unable to have your steady income you had, or some unexpected expense comes up. We want to make sure we have a cushion. And not only is that important just to have that as a backup, but what we find is most individuals, there's a strong sense of comfort by having at least a few months in reserve. It's not as crucial what's going on a day-to-day basis, and there's a huge reduction in stress, financial stress and psychological stress when everybody has a little bit in there. 2020 will be my example for probably forever of why it's important to have an emergency fund and at least have a couple months of expenses. So if you don't have any of that yet, that becomes your first priority in terms of savings, of starting to funnel a little bit of extra money into an emergency fund that you can have just in case something happens. So tools related to these different pieces. We want to talk about debt management. So I want to add in an example here to explain what this looks like. So if you want to replace the carpets in your house and put it on a credit card, because we'll use that, which high interest rate credit card, but sometimes that's the only option, right? If you were to make the minimum payments on that card to cover the carpet, a new carpet, this is how much it really costs you. So we're assuming it's $4,000 for the carpet, which might be a little low in this day and age. An interest rate of 18%. Credit card interest rates are actually a little bit higher now, depending on the card, given that interest rates have increased. That first minimum payment would be, about $160. So in total, over the lifetime of paying off this part of your carpet, if you just pay the minimum payments, you're going to end up paying over $6,200, and that would take you actually 10 and a half years. So that actual $2,273, what did that interest get you? Actually got you nothing. It ended up just costing you a lot of money, and money that could have been used elsewhere, because the interest was just slowly eating away. And it also took 10 years where you had this new carpet payment kind of hanging over your head. At that point, you might need new carpet again. So it's one of those things where we think about where we can pull from in terms of debt management. And ideally, credit cards are the last place. So what does that $2,200 get you? It gets you nothing. It goes just straight to the bank. Appropriate use of debt. Debt in an ideal world, what we really only want to use debt for is to finance things like buying a house, college education, or private school education, if that a tuition, starting a small business, after you have a business plan. That's really those big ticket items. That's where we really want to use debt if we have to use debt. And ideally, we're able to pay with checking it and our monthly income for all of the kind of things that come on a monthly basis. Certainly easier said than done, but that's really is a goal from a planning perspective of where we want to use debt. We want to use it strategically and just for the really big ticket items that we can't afford on a monthly basis, or even after saving for a couple of years. So getting rid of debt, where do you start? How do you go about this? The first step for getting rid of debt is always to understand, what do you owe? Where is it going? Who do you owe money to? Looking at the various creditors. What are your balances? So on the sheet you're writing down, for each one of the debts you have, what's the current balance? And not just the balance and what institution it's held at, but what's the interest rate? Interest rates can change on a monthly basis. Credit card interest rates can change. If it's a student loan, write down your balance as well as the interest rate and how much you have to pay on a monthly basis, the monthly minimum. So do this for each one of the debts you have and take a look. Sometimes it can be scary to take a look when the numbers feel bigger, but the first step in order to start getting rid of it is to develop a plan. And we do that by listing everything out and cataloging what it is. So decide on a plan to get rid of the debt. Some people prefer to start with the smallest loan balance, if there is one, and pay that off first, just to feel like, okay, I got one out of the way. That feels good. It's going to motivate me to move on to the next larger balance. Other people like to approach it by, okay, looking at all of my different debts, which one has the highest interest rate? Whichever one has the highest rate is likely the one that it's pulling most of my excess resources. It's taking away that the most. It's taking that away from me the most. So if I pay that off sooner, I'm going to ultimately end up paying less in total interest than if I just let that one still stay in the back burner. So whichever one you choose to do, whether it's start with the smallest balance and clear that out, or start with the highest interest and clear it out, whatever your preference is, start somewhere and make it consistent on a monthly basis. And you'll start to see over time, after a few months, a little bit longer, you'll start to see those balances go down. And hopefully that's a motivating source. You can say, okay, I'm making a difference. It's taking time, but I'm making a difference. And keep up on, of course, those essential payments like mortgages, auto loans, those car payments, student loan payments, if they're required by a private institution right now, they're required to be paid back. Make sure you're not missing those, because that can certainly, we all know, directly impact your credit report and your ability to get financing for those big ticket items in the future. If you are having trouble, do actually reach out and talk to the creditors, talk to the credit card company, talk to someone who's holding the loan. There are a lot of resources actually to help consumers work through. It's one of those things I think we don't want to talk to them, or sometimes it feels, it's uncomfortable or it feels shameful or whatever it might be. But you never know until you ask. And sometimes they actually can help you devise a payment plan if that's helpful, or they can actually help you restructure some of this as well. I would always say double check the small print, the fine print, for any time you're talking to a creditor or anybody about shifting up some sort of debt repayment plan or any type of new type of loan you're taking out. It is really important to read the fine print, especially if it's from a smaller institution and not necessarily a really, really large bank. So please make sure you're double checking so you understand what they have access to, frankly, and that sometimes some of your various assets are up for grabs if we don't meet those obligations and paying that debt back. As much as possible, please stay away from those predatory products like payday loans, high interest products, the solicitations we probably all get in the mail for paying off this or paying off that with a 30% interest rate. There's a reason oftentimes they're mailing you those things, and it's because they're making money off of you. So as much as you can, try to stay away from high interest products and double check and see if there are other resources, other ways to get other types of financing if you need that, but try to avoid particularly payday loans as much as possible. And one thing that I hopefully we all know, but I think sometimes it gets lost, is every one of us has access to a free credit report every year from each one of the 3 credit bureaus. They're required to provide it to us. So it's one of those things, it's like a great thing when you're doing this checkup, you're checking in on your financial plan. Make sure to go to annualcreditreport.com. You can pull each one or just one of your credit reports if you want to do that, and then you can pull the others later on. You'd be surprised at how many people actually find things on there that are not accurate, and it's completely incorrect, and it can affect your ability to get approved for financing for those big ticket items. Last thing you want is when you're ready to go buy that house or go get your down payment on that car and get the financing on that car, and there's something else comes up in your credit report that's not yours, and it's directly impacting your ability to get that financing. And it's also good to take a look, because if you have late payments or there are other things from your past that you're trying to work off, it does take 7 years for some of those items to roll off, and 10 years or so for a bankruptcy. But it's important to know where you're at, see what the credit card companies have for you or the institutions have for you, and know when those are also going to fall off as well. So going back to the emergency fund and that emergency reserve, like that was mentioning earlier in our conversation today. Set up this emergency fund with enough money, ideally to cover at least 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So that's not necessarily all of the income you're making each month. We want to think about back to what are those fixed expenses I have to cover each month? Mortgage, car payments, insurance policy premiums for car insurance or health insurance, those things that are fixed. You want to make, and of course, some money for food and groceries. You want to make sure you have all of those fixed ones accounted for. Figure out what that is when you're putting your budget together. Look at that on a monthly basis, 1 month's worth, and multiply times 3 or 6. If you're not there yet, start setting aside a little extra each month. That becomes a top priority to make sure you're building up some sort of reserve for yourself. Make sure it's somewhere safe that you can easily access. Ideally with a larger banking institution, underneath the mattress is not the place we would want to have that you save that money just in case that were to get stolen or something happens to it. You want it to be somewhere in an institution where you can access it when you need it. So a savings account, a money market account, something that's hopefully earning a little bit of a higher yield, a high yield savings. So your money's going to be safe and hopefully grow a little bit while it's in your emergency fund. And as much as possible, please just use it for actual emergencies. It's really easy to tap into it, or, I spent a little bit more money, I'm going to go on this vacation. But try to make that a separate fund. So if it's helpful to you to have that be in a completely separate bank account, open up another bank account for free in most institutions. Do that and start to put the money in there so that it's for that intended purpose. Some people actually prefer to open a separate savings account at a completely different bank so that they don't have access to it and they can't just immediately drag and drop it into a checking account if they're spending a little bit more money that month. If that's what's helpful to you, do that. If whatever's going to work for you, so you know that you have a little bit of a bank of money just in case, make sure to follow through with that one. And then also use it. Try to avoid using it for tapping credit or your long-term savings. And these really do help to decrease stress on yourself, your family, and that actually ends up making a huge impact in the long run. That financial stress can certainly turn into physical and psychological stress. So if there's one takeaway from today, please make sure you have money set aside in an emergency fund to protect yourself and your family. So there are two layers of the funds as we like to think about them. One is for the things that come up unexpectedly all the time. You know, something breaks, a car tire pops. There's one of your kids has a injury. Animals. My dog certainly costs me extra money every month, all the time. So 38% of the time, most of these are unplanned medical expenses. 28%, they're actually related to a car accident, something happens, something needs to get fixed in the car breaks down. And 20% of the time it's related to our home. Water heater stops working. There needs to be a repair that happens at home as well. So that's usually what we want to have at a bare minimum for the things that come up on a regular basis. And then the big picture, that real kind of emergency fund for those 3 to 6 months of living expenses for things that can leave. So that's where we mention jobs, health, and even spouses. We want to make sure we have a little bit of a backup for things that can leave or things we can lose, so that we're protected and our family is protected for the long term. Talking about investments, and I'm going to digress here for just a few moments to talk a little bit more about investments. But when we think about investments and what that looks like, we really want to think about what's the intention, what's the time frame, or what we call the time horizon. Is it for the shorter term? Are we trying to set aside money for a new car, or a new home, a down payment? Or are we thinking long term, like I want to set aside money for my retirement and this is going to be 10, 20, 30 plus years in the future. So think about the time frame, because that really does matter of what is a type of appropriate investment for that money. And are you investing wisely? Tax advantaged accounts, or those retirement accounts like a 401k through work, or an IRA, that individual retirement account, a 529 plan, which is 529 education plan available to save for kids for college. Are you dollar cost averaging, meaning you're putting in kind of the same amount of money on a regular basis, versus, okay, I think the market's going to struggle, so I'm going to wait, and I'm going to keep waiting, and I'm going to keep waiting until I feel like it's the perfect time, and you've missed out on quite a bit of months or years because you weren't ready to actually get started. So dollar cost averaging is starting to contribute on a regular basis is really helpful in making this successful. And then, of course, diversify. We absolutely never feel anybody should have all of their money in one particular stock, 2 or 3 particular stocks or a particular investment. We want to spread out that risk. You're diversifying your risk across a number of different options, because while one stock or company can skyrocket up or skyrocket down, when you spread it out over a number of them or a basket of those, that doesn't have the same effect, or they're not quite as volatile. So, but before you invest, this is where also we want to think about a couple other planning pieces. We want to get a handle on your cash flow. Build that emergency fund that we've been talking about. Pay off expensive credit card debt. And that's really important before you invest, because the credit card debt is often eating away more than what you're able to earn right now in the market. So you want to clear that out first. Make sure you're looking at the right kinds of insurance products, not just anything, just things you actually need. And make sure you have a will. Touching on an estate plan for 1 second, just make sure you have your wishes written down for where you want your assets to go, what you want life to look like for you. Even if it's on a piece of paper, you sign it, you have a friend of yours sign it who witnessed you do it. That's really, really important to help protect your family. So investing approaches that work when it comes to actual investments. The earlier you can start, the better. regularly and automatically, right? Just have, if you are setting aside money, set aside a similar amount each month, what's comfortable to you based on your spending plan. Like you're mentioning dollar cost average in, meaning use the same, if you're going to start setting aside $50 a month into an investment account, make sure you do that on a consistent basis. Try to take advantage of automatic transfers like we have in our savings accounts. You can do that also into like your investment accounts or your or savings. If you have direct deposits from your paycheck, that can go straight in. That's even better. Out of sight, out of mind. And then it's in there, it's already invested. We're less likely to spend it. And then a key part, certainly with what we've experienced the last couple of years with investments, stay in the market. The market is going to go up. It's going to go down. Nobody has a crystal ball on exactly what's going to happen next. The most important thing you can do is stay invested, make sure you're in investments you're comfortable with, you're diversified, but stay in it for the long term. Depending on what your age is, for those watching today, we're each going to experience multiple investment cycles and market cycles over a lifetime still. It doesn't matter if you're 17 or 70, we're all going to experience more than one. Markets go up and they go down. It's part of the gig, and they do start over again. So make sure you stay in for long haul. That's actually how you build wealth in the long term. And to start, make sure you're taking advantage of a retirement plan through work if you have one. If you're eligible, if you're not sure, check in with your human resources. It's so crucial to take advantage of those. They have special kind of tax treatments. Your company might be actually contributing money on your behalf as well. Please do to reach out and double check. Or if you are in one, log back into your account again. Maybe see if you can start and add an additional percentage out of your paycheck that's being set aside for retirement. Take a look at what percentage you're contributing or the flat dollar amount and see if you can increase it. What we notice is if you increase it 1% or 2%, almost nobody notices the difference. It's a couple dollars here or there, but it can make a huge difference in the long run. So do things that are going to help you set yourself up for consistent saving and investing over time. Look into an individual retirement account or an IRA if you don't have one through work, or if you're maxing out what you're able to set aside in a work retirement plan. I can consider contributing to a college savings account if you have children, or if you want to set aside some money for yourself to go back to school or go to school. And then the last one is invest in, if you have excess resources, you can open up a taxable account, which, as positions are sold each year, you can't pay taxes on if you had any gains in it, but that's kind of the fourth one, the fourth priority in terms of investing. So going back over to our financial planning discussion, or financial planning process discussion, I want to talk also about tools for risk management. So again, when we say risk management as a financial planner, we're really talking about insurance products, but also we're really looking at how do we make sure that that you're protected, the family is protected, and what is their appropriate amount. So for each one of these types of insurance plans, products, policies, they're insuring a risk that you don't necessarily want to cover in case the worst case situation happens. So insurance that we should all consider, personal ones for health insurance, life, disability, in case you're not able to work anymore, long-term care, something that we're hearing a lot more about now, where a lot of our retirees are needing to go into assisted living facilities. So there is long-term care insurance that can be purchased when people are younger to help offset the costs down the line. So if you have family members that have needed long-term care or needed extended care in a facility, something to consider, certainly as you're getting closer to your 50s, 55, that's really kind of the main cutoff where the prices start to jump up from there. So really start to think about that if that's something that you think could be affected. And it ends up happening to majority are women who end up needing a long-term care facility. Also, the types of insurance we're most familiar with: car insurance, home insurance, rental insurance, liability or umbrella policies too. Things to think about: what do you want to protect? What life stage are you in? If you're young and you don't have as many assets, oftentimes you don't need as much insurance. If you have children, you have a family, or you've been working and you've been able to set aside a bunch in savings, you probably want to have some more insurance, especially if you have children and a partner who's relying on you, especially if you're the main breadwinner, to help protect in case something happens to your life or health. And then, do you have those right insurance products? Sometimes we see a lot of the required auto policies in California, for example, are inadequate if someone actually gets into an accident. There's not enough coverage. Those are the premiums are lower on those lowest policies. It's something we have to have in order to have our license. But if you get into an actual accident in pretty much anywhere in California, the insurance for a basic policy is not enough to cover the costs that are associated. If we think about all of the cars on the road today and how expensive cars are and how many really expensive cars are on the road in Los Angeles, as well as if you end up being at fault for the accident itself. So sometimes it's not enough, and sometimes it's excessive, where it's someone sold you something and they are getting way too much money by selling you this insurance agent's getting way too much money selling you this product, and it's way more than you need. You're paying way too much money. So you want to make sure you have a trusted person to talk about this with, or you really feel confident in your insurance agent or agents or broker, just to make sure you are in the right products for where you are, what life stage you're in. But again, look at those fees, look at the deductibles, the copays. What are you responsible for if something happens? One area we often see, my final point on this, majority of homeowner policies, the homeowner does not have enough insurance on the property, or it's not directly tied to inflation. So as your property values increased in the prior years, a lot of people, their home insurance is not keeping up with that. So if something happens like a fire or a mudslide or a flood, which we've certainly experienced in Los Angeles, a lot of those people are underwater and actually have to pay out quite a bit of money when they think they should be fine. So it's really important to double check those and read through and familiarize yourselves with what's covered and what's not for your situation. So some of these risks, not everything has to be protected with insurance. I always want to caution everyone here that most insurance individuals, they get paid by having you buy a policy. So there can be a bit of a conflict of interest, because the more you buy, the more money they're making. So it's just something to think about, but you don't necessarily need to buy a policy for everything. In some cases, you can actually reduce the risk. The example here, you have a new medication which makes you feel groggy. To reduce the risk, the risk of a car accident, and that is a risk, right? Risk management. You could ask a friend, a spouse, or a partner to drive you instead if you know you're taking the medication and you know you really shouldn't be driving. Other things that can be handled by completely avoiding the risk instead of reducing, like we reduced there, avoiding. If you have small children, you are worried about, okay, I'm concerned about pools and not always being able to watch what's going on there. You would avoid that risk completely by, if you're shopping for a home, avoiding houses that have pools. So things like that can help you as well, just to think about in terms of where else you can reduce the risk. You don't have to pay for a plan for that. Step 5 here is the key one of probably all of these when we talk about financial planning. We've done this work. We've looked at our income, our expenses, our assets, our plan, our goals. We've looked at the excess we have, our savings, investing. But if we don't execute that plan, if it just sits on that piece of paper, you might be more well informed about what you'd like to have happen, but it's not going to happen if it just sits there. So truly try to set a timeline for yourself. Here's an example. So if you're working on this today, the first week, break it into bite-sized pieces, create your spending plan, go through those income, expenses, put that all together, and then actually come up with what your spending plan looks like on a monthly basis. Week 2, start trying to put away, this example here, extra credit cards. Start trying to not use those for everything that comes up, and see where you can kind of cut down on some of the various expenses. Week 3, if one of the goals is to start saving a little bit for a child's education or in college or your own or for another family member's, actually take the time, make the steps, open up, research which institution you want to go with, which banking institution or custodian, and actually open up that college savings account. You'd be surprised. A lot of these are actually free, and Scholar Share 529 is the key one in California to set aside for college savings for students. And then, for example, week 4, let's break this out too. Let's create a credit report. Check your credit. Use either one or all 3 of those free credit reports you have each year, and start to look through, double check. Okay, do I still have this? This account is still showing it's open. I haven't had this in 7 years. Let's see what's going on here, and double check and go through the line items on your credit report. And this wasn't clear enough. From our perspective as a financial planner, a plan that isn't executed is worthless. So please make sure you take the time, even if it's a really basic plan. Make sure you are implementing what your takeaways are from spending the time listening today and going through this exercise. And with financial planning, you can keep control of spending, manage your debt, build savings and investments, protect your family from financial crises, reduce that financial, physical, and psychological stress, and most importantly, make progress toward your life goals, to what matters most to you. And that's, again, really kind of the end goal here. We want to help identify what you have, what you need, what matters to you, and build action steps to get you to the next phase. And sometimes it can feel overwhelming, but the key thing is to break it up into bite-sized pieces, make a plan for yourself to implement the different aspects of this, and actually work towards checking those off each time. And make sure you reward yourself in some way so that you know you're making positive progress for you and your family. Number 6 is always to monitor the plan. Set up that schedule, whether it's, again, quarterly, it can be annual, can be semi-annual, but at least on an annual basis, it's important to double check where you're at. And also so you can see the progress you've made over the course of that quarter or that year towards your goals. And sometimes it feels like we're not making a lot of headway, but when we step back and we look months later, a year later, a couple years later on what we've accomplished since when we started, it's actually been quite a bit if you've been able to work on some of these different pieces. When you are monitoring your plan, what is anything changed in your life? Is your income changed? Have your expenses changed? Is your career situation changed? Anything with the family? Has someone been born in the family? Has someone passed away in the family? How does that impact your plan? Are you keeping your spending under control? How are you doing with your spending plan? How's it going? Have you made progress? How's paying down debt going? And again, it's not meant something to beat yourself up about if you're not where you want to be. The key thing is to having these check-ins is what actually helps get you to the next step. Even if you don't feel like you've made a lot of progress, by doing the check-in, you are making progress. Are you saving as much as you planned? If not, why? And are you paying down the debts as much as you planned? If not, why? Identify where you're struggling, where you could use some support, and where else you should look in order to make sure you're still on track. And then again, if you need to adjust the plan, make some changes. And whether that is through some of the different financial planning apps, whether that is on your piece of paper you're writing down here, or somewhere on your computer or in your phone, just keep track of where you're at. You can see where you were the date you worked on it, and then what changes you're going to make that you're going to implement now. Maybe at the time you were not ready to, okay, I'm going to work on some of these debts first. I don't really have the excess resources to start saving for that car, for that down payment. But maybe now you have been able to set a little bit more up in the reserve, in your emergency reserve or your emergency fund. You pay down a little bit of debt, and maybe now you're able to start setting aside more for savings for those shorter term or longer term goals. So just keep an eye on that as well over time. So other places to get help, I want to mention as well, onefpa.org, that's or the Financial Planning Association. You can also go to plannersearch.org. That's if you wanted to look at or speak to a certified financial planner, someone like myself. If you do feel like you want professional help, there are a large number of qualified planners all over the country. They have very different ways that they charge. Some just charge an hourly fee. Some of them charge for a financial plan or just a fixed fee. And again, that's only if you feel it's appropriate that you would like help from a financial planner or someone or some sort of qualified planner. But that's an option. But anytime you're talking to a financial professional that deals in financial planning or investing or whatever the case might be, please, it's always important to protect yourself and double check broker check by FINRA. That's where you can look up the history of that individual. If there are any kind of negative marks or any complaints about them, it's important to protect yourself there too. Or if you're looking out for a family member, double check who they're working with. Make sure their record is frankly is clean as well. A final thing, we have a couple quick resources here. One I really love is called, if you were to type in Building Wealth from the Dallas Federal Reserve, it has interactive guides for iPads, guides for teachers, students, consumers across the board. There are some great resources, and that's actually a fantastic one to help walk you through how to build a financial plan that we just talked about. They actually have worksheets on basically every single kind of the main aspects we talked about today. They have something for that. So if you want to actually take what we were talking about into and actually start your plan, go to type in or search Building Wealth by the Dallas Fed, and it'll take you to a fantastic website that can help you create this exact thing we've been discussing today. The other one I want to mention, a Foundation for Financial Planning. It has a bunch of consumer resources and free resources. That's usually my go-to source when I'm doing pro bono planning to offer to the public. It's readily available, links to everything. Building Wealth is on there, but it's a great resource to start with for whether it's credit sources, everything else, pretty much across the spectrum. If you go into the Foundation for Financial Planning, the ffpprobono.org, you'll find a lot of resources at your disposal here. So that kind of wraps up for me. We're certainly going to open up for questions in just a moment, but I want to thank you so much for your time today and for your attention. I know it's kind of a lot drinking from the fire hose, but please send in any questions you have and we'll be happy to answer them. And thank you so much, Caroline. Back to you.
Hi, I'm back. Okay, we have time for a few questions. We have a two-parter that came in for John Ariana. I'm sorry if I'm misunderstood. So she's saying, what would the ratio of breaking down your paycheck? And then also, as an example, like if you want to plan it out, 20%, 20%, like savings, paying bills, 50% monthly, 10% family contributions. What do you recommend, Jamie?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you so much for that. It's because it's important, certainly. So just to, I know we don't have a ton of time. So I would always try to set aside, for example, you want to get to 20% for savings, and that can be a combination of retirement and other savings, but like that's really what we should all be aiming for, is trying to save 20%. Again, easier said than done, but that would be that portion. From a housing perspective, and this is also from mortgage lender perspective, you really want to have your housing costs be under 30% of your monthly total, your gross income, not your net income after taxes, your gross income. We certainly know in Los Angeles that is a lot easier said than done given the cost of housing here, but that ideally should be 30%, under 30% for that. If you have children, it depends on how much someone would want to contribute for children for college, for example, but that would potentially be anywhere from 5 to 10%, depending on how far out they are. Or same kind of thing, if there is a family members, whether they're elderly or elsewise you're taking care of, that can be between that 5 to 10% or in that same bucket of 10% for family. I think that actually is a good general starting point. Each family is different though. And then there's usually at least 20% or so for incidentals, 20% for kind of those other expenses between the various bills, utilities, and the rest of it. And then I think we're already at, what are we at, 20, 30, almost at there. And the remainder kind of is more that discretionary spending. But the key things you want to think about are housing, saving, as if you can't get that up to there. And then, obviously debt repayment comes in the middle. So I hope I answered your question, but I think you're on the right track in terms of thinking about what are those different categories look like.
Okay, thank you. There's one more question. So if I want to buy a house, and should I wait to start investing in stocks? Because you've heard things like, oh, you shouldn't invest if you're trying to buy a house within a year. Is that really a thing, or is it just still do it? What do you think?
That's a great question. Yes. If you have a goal, if that is your, like that, when you talk about prioritizing that list, if that's your number one priority is to make sure you have money for, like, my most important thing coming up for me is making sure I'm setting aside money and I'm able to buy a house. If that is the case, if your time frame is, the next 6 months to 2 years, that money actually should not be in the stock market. The stock market is a bit too volatile for something that's that short term. If you are thinking, oh, I'm going to probably look to buy something in 5 or 10 years, or I'm going to do some other big expense in 5 to 10 years, that can be invested. But if your time frame is certainly under 2 and under 1 year, that money should not be in stocks. It can be in, a high yield savings or a treasury bill or something like that. That's pretty stable. That's still going to earn something, but it should not be in the stock market.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I was always curious about that. I own a home, but I was always curious. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up now. So thank you again, Jamie, for a great presentation. If anyone missed any part of this presentation, it is available for viewing on LAPL's YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Los Angeles Library. It will be up indefinitely. And Financial Literacy Month continues with our next streaming program is next Friday, April 28th, credit reports and scores at 12 p.m. And this Saturday, we have Financial Literacy Day coming up at the Central Library with Jamie and the rest of the Financial Planning Association of Los Angeles. So we're very excited about that. For more information of all of our Financial Literacy Month programs and to make an appointment to talk to a certified financial planner, go to our website, lapl.org/financial literacy month. All the information is on there. Thank you again, Jamie. Great presentation, great questions. Thank you so much. Everyone, have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.